eBay Motors and ADVRider.com welcome you to episode 61 of the Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week, we revisit the KTM saga with Brian Price, who's done some of the best independent journalism on the brand's woes. KTM was a brand with huge swagger. Will ownership by an Indian company change that? And will it ever get back to business as usual? These are some of the issues we talk about this week. But before we take a leap, a word from our sponsor. Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. Well, it's okay because, whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything. Brake rotors, lights, and tire exhaust systems, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. And Brian, before we jump right into this, and you wisely pointed out that we sort of overlooked it during the first time that we spoke a while back about KTM. But you've been in the motorcycle business a long time. You're not just some schmuck with a computer. Well, you are, but you actually are fascinated by the business, and you've worked in the business for a long time. So, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a bit of an oral CV, please.
As you mentioned, I am one of the many people who has worked in this industry all of my life. I'm also fortunate, though, to have had a couple of really good positions deep inside some companies fairly early on in the development that gave me a sort of better perspective on how the aftermarket operates. And then just by osmosis, I have always paid as much attention as I could to how the industry works. But those two companies, first of all, I worked for Fox Racing and Alpine Stars for a total combined of about 15 years in product management and marketing, and worked on all sorts of apparel and gear. And in those companies, you get to know a lot of other people, so that's helped with the osmosis. And then for the last 15 or so years, I should know this, 17 years, I have my own business in Bend, Oregon, called Atomic Moto. And the thing that I'd like to emphasize most of all is that motorcycles and the motorcycle industry are a bit of a philosophy, almost a religion for me. And so I like everything about them. I like the business. I like their mechanical value, the sport value, their artistic value, everything about them. And so thankfully, you guys have granted me the great opportunity to talk to people here.
Well, and I'll add to that it was Zach Kurlick, who's the managing editor of ADVRider.com, who put me onto you. And he and Michael Ularic, who Michael studies the industry really carefully through his company. But they were both really impressed by the reporting that you did. And they thought, and as do I, that it's some of the most sort of clear-eyed reporting of the KTM funk. Shall we call it funk? Not necessarily funky, but in a funk.
It works.
Lots have been happening lately with KTM, but bring us sort of, if you will, bring us up to date on the bit of the backstory for those that do not live and breathe the KTM drama.
Okay, back in November, KTM's parent company applied for a form of Austrian insolvency. As it turned out, they had acquired quite a bit of debt, over $2.2 billion, and they ran out of cash. And the type of insolvency that they applied for gave them a period of time to come up with a plan, have that plan approved, and then to execute the plan in order to return them to some sort of stable operations. And the form of insolvency they applied for has very strict conditions. And if those conditions aren't met, it's very explicit that the company will be liquidated. There's no other options there. So they either do what they're supposed to do or they suffer some pretty severe consequences. And as that date, which was May 23rd, was approaching for them to have finalized the execution of all of their conditions, it became increasingly apparent that they weren't going to make it. They weren't going to actually meet those terms and conditions. And so that was a bit of a gun to their head, I suppose, as far as how they survived and went forward. And as a result, a company that had invested in them quite some time ago, starting in 2007, Bajaj Auto from India, ended up making a financial deal with them to take over the company.
And so that So Bajaj stumped up and provided the funds that they needed to meet this May 23rd deadline, correct?
They did. They did three things. The first is they loaned them quite a bit of money, as I understand it, $450 million to Pure Mobility, which is the third tier out of four in the KTM corporate structure, and then another 150 million to Pure Bajaj AG, which is one level above that, the second tier, if you will. And then the second thing is that they created a call option. Basically, that's an agreement that allows them to make a purchase at a predetermined price at a predetermined time with certain conditions. And they don't have to make that purchase. They have the option to make it or not make it. But that date is next May. And the third thing is that the only other requirement they made is that the current CEO not be part of the new company.
Now you've given us the sort of the lowdown on the basics of what's happened, and so what about you just personally reacting to this? I mean, this seemed like at least I'm certainly not following the story as closely as you do, but it seems sort of a fait accompli that Bajaj was going to come in at some point. I mean, that's what everybody said and everybody believed. Was it a foregone conclusion in your mind?
It wasn't. It was always the most likely conclusion, the most obvious conclusion, then the most feasible outcome. But I think we all held out some hope that there would be some other form of them going forward, which continued their sort of Austrian base and current structure. But yes, I think that's always been the most likely scenario.
Now, you said that with a bit of a wistfulness in your voice. Do you think that KTM would have ultimately benefited from remaining a European country versus Indian ownership? Do you have a view on that?
I do not, actually. What I think is at the root of that is that it's a very it inspires the brand inspires a lot of passion. And I think when you have brands that you're very passionate about, the idea of them changing is very hard to accept. And so I think that we all sort of had this hope that was attached to that, not in the business sense, but it would be basically that the brand that many have come to know and love, and I own one too, would continue in the form that we knew it.
Now, it's an interesting thing, and I find this really curious these days with a lot of these legacy brands, and of course, a lot of them are owned by Indian companies. You think of Jaguar Land Rover, Ducati owned by the Germans, which actually may really make sense because if the Germans do the bookkeeping and the Italians do the design and build them, that might be the ideal situation.
Right.
I guess we're just not really up to speed with companies from with Indian companies or say Chinese companies owning these brands, but I think we'd better get used to it, don't you think?
I do. It's definitely a global world, and Bajaj is definitely a global player. And there are some really positive aspects to the partnership between the two. And, if you're a hardcore KTM fan, it's going to be really hard to see any version of them going forward as being appealing. But I feel that not only was it the most likely scenario, but it's probably the one that provides them the most strong foundation to continue forward. Bajaj has a lot of resources, both financial and structural, production, for example, that really put them and KTM in a good position to go forward.
Can you tell us a bit more about Bajaj? I mean, I know they're huge, but I don't really know a lot beyond that. And I think a lot of our listeners are in the same boat. What can you tell me about them?
It's a family organized company. In some other countries, that's the family system business is very, very normal, very typical. And that's the case in India, at least with this company. They were formed in the 1920s. And so they've been around for quite a bit of time. They're quite large, quite powerful. They sell, 3.1 million motorcycles. And I think that they're a 3 billion plus company. The family is quite wealthy. There's something like number 80 or 88 in the Forbes billionaire list. They're worth in the 20-ish billion range. And the person behind this acquisition, really behind, they have many divisions. It's a conglomerate. They have many, many divisions, but we're speaking about the motorcycle division. And the person that is the impetus behind it is Rajiv Bajaj, and he's 59. He's also a billionaire. He was educated outside of the country, so he's quite cosmopolitan, quite worldly, and he has, I think, a bit more passion for motorcycles than certainly than anyone else in the family. And I think that that's what's driving his purchase. And the other thing is that they've been involved in KTM since 2007. They first invested in KTM in 2007, and then they stepped up that investment in 2009. Incidentally, KTM got in a little bit of a financial tight spot back then, and Bajaj stepped in to help them. And so they've been with KTM for a very, very long time. They collaborate with them on distribution and production. You know, we know that Bajaj builds some of the KTM models like the 390 series, and they also distribute KTM in India and some other parts of Southeast Asia. So the two companies are already very well intertwined, and they're probably more familiar with each other than they would be if it was just a new outside investor.
The Lowdown Show is presented by adbrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. How significant an acquisition is KTM to Bajaj? Is it a little niche thing that they do? Because as you said, they make 3 million two-wheelers a year, most of them small capacity, I would think, given their market. But is it a feather in their cap? What's their interest in KTM?
It's I think it's a very important acquisition because it gives them first of all, it really elevates their brand image, and not in the way that an acquisition of, like, you know, Ferrari being acquired by Fiat does. Those two companies remain separate because these two companies are sort of intertwined, and we can presume that the product is going to be a bit of a blend between the two. It really takes Bajaj from being a more entry level, or transportation, I should say, transportation oriented manufacturer to a much more boutique manufacturer. Gives them a lot more R&D and technical competency, really high-end, highly skilled manufacturing base in Austria, in addition to the one that they have in India. And it gives them the opportunity to have a near bottom to top product mix, making everything from, you know, high-end race bikes all the way down to basic transportation. And that changes the nature of their company quite a bit. I shouldn't say that it puts them in the same league or structure as Honda, but it kind of puts them in the same sort of building, you know, if not room. They now have racing and transportation motorcycles and scooters in lots of different markets, and once again, the product mix is very very vertical. So I think it's a huge elevation for them. You know, this is a huge, forget the point of view of how it's looked at from here in the US. From Bajaj's standpoint, this is a fantastic acquisition, and there's a lot of questions, perhaps more questions than answers, as to how they execute going forward. But yeah, I'm sure that they are thrilled at this.
One thing that always interests me about this is what does the Austrianness of the brand mean to Bajaj? I mean, is that something that, in your mind, that they would want to really focus on as a way to keep that profile, or as a proud Indian company, do they want to make KTM more Indian? I wonder what their worldview is. Do you have any sense of that?
I don't yet. I know that there have been some assurances by the current CEO of KTM on the Austrian side, Gottfried Neumeister, that in his words, they didn't buy us for all of this money to shut down Austrian production. And I don't really see that happening. I think that the higher end product has more credibility if it's built in Austria, or at least built in that part of the world. And to relocate it entirely would be probably a hit to the brand image, and certainly a hit to the most passionate core customers. I'm sure that they're going to want to explore those, the word that is always used is synergies. I'm sure they're going to want to explore their manufacturing options and supplier options and look at the production costs of things. And that makes sense. But I think they have to tread very, very carefully in how they go forward doing that, and so as not to damage the perception to the end customers.
One thing that you really see, rephrase this. My words aren't working today. As a European motorcycle brand, they're really in motorcycling, or one of the great motorcycling meccas of the world. You think of, MotoGP racing and the Italian, Spanish, and they're obsessed with it. And KTM is sort of in the middle of that. And of course, they pursued incredibly aggressively. And I always thought it was an odd thing that, KTM is in. They make a Moto 3 bike, and then they brand the spec bike in Moto 2 as a KTM, and then they've got 4 bikes in the grid in MotoGP. For a company that a lot of people still think of as primarily a dirt or a sort of dual sport sort of brand. I mean, they don't make a dedicated sport bike, for instance. Not that that's necessarily here nor there, but I do find it sort of curious, and I wonder what Bajaj's appetite or willingness to participate in things like MotoGP and in things like Dakar or hard enduro. I mean, does anyone have any idea yet how they feel about these things, or will they be much shrewder than KTM has proven to be?
I don't think they've given any indication yet. If they're smart, they will stay in MotoGP and Dakar, or even invest in it more. To my way of thinking, they now have, first of all, more resources to support the racing effort, the racing division. And second of all, and this is really important, they have much, much more justification to do it. The halo effect of being in MotoGP didn't do a lot for dirt bike sales, but it's tremendously important if you're talking about selling in a global market in all of these other countries where motorcycles are just emerging. It's a fantastic brand image boost for them. So personally, I think that I don't really think it made a lot of sense before, or not complete sense. I think it really makes sense now. And really, gosh, I hope that they do continue and even step the results up. They certainly now are in much better financial position to do those things.
Do you have any sense of the price that the price that Bajaj paid for this new chunk of KTM, bigger chunk of KTM? Did they get it at a deal?
That's a very good question. All of the information that has come out, including press releases from Bajaj themselves, define the purchase or acquisition in a somewhat vague way. They have invested about $900 million, $900 million so far since KTM got into financial trouble. They have this call option. If you read the literal definition of a call option, it is possible that they will decide not to complete the acquisition. That's an interesting point. But we don't really know how much they're paying. And then the bigger question is, KTM's about, I think they earned about 166 million euros in 2023. And so, that 900 million factor is a multiple of EBITDA. The profit of the company is sort of within ranges, maybe a little bit high. But to buy a company in KTM's condition, it seems unusual. It's a lot of money to pay for a company in KTM's condition, again, because really there's not a clear way forward. They're not a healthy operating company right now, and they're projected to lose quite a bit of money in the next period of time. So it is a certainty that Bajaj will be investing quite a bit more to take them forward. And from that point of view, they paid quite a bit.
I wonder if that investment was almost a necessary evil because of their connection, with KTM already. Now, if they were a standalone company that had no, interaction or no business relationship with KTM, I suspect the terms might have been tougher or the money less, but I would think that, you sort of have to spend to protect what you already have. And I guess they were loath to lose this relationship that they already have with KTM, because as you said, the companies have go back, almost 2 decades as having this relationship.
Yes, what you've described makes sense, but it's also the definition of the sunken cost fallacy, which is where you.
I like the sound of that. I don't know what that means, but please tell me.
it's a business phrase or cliche where um, the entity has invested a whole bunch of money in something, and it is not working, and so they've sunk a bunch of costs into it. And in order to keep it going, they have to sink even more money into it. And the fallacy part is that may turn out to be a bad decision, a bad investment. So, the justification for putting more money into something being that you put a bunch of money into it in the past is generally viewed with quite a bit of skepticism, and should be here.
So it's essentially throwing good money after bad. Is that the gist of it? That's the risk of it?
Yes. I mean, in the motorcycle definition, the term basket case has a really nice meaning. You got a motorcycle, and it's in a bunch of parts. And sometimes when you get a basket case, it includes parts from multiple motorcycles. And so you get a whole bunch of stuff, and then you have the fun of putting it all back together. And I keep saying that phrase over and over in my head, that Bajaj buying KTM is them buying a basket case. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but they have all these fantastic components, and it is really unclear as to how they're going to assemble them. And when I'm thinking about that, I'm imagining all sorts of things. Like, no one has commented on the fact that now KTM owns WP suspension. Now KTM owns, Bajaj owns WP suspension. If I read their organizational structure correctly, now Bajaj owns Kiska Design. Now they own an electric motorcycle R&D company. And so there's all these little pieces of this acquisition that the place which they will be placed is still unknown.
You said something that caught my ear, which is that the deal is not officially signed and the money handed over. What is the process of this actually coming to fruition?
Well, first of all of the press releases regarding the acquisition say that Bajaj is taking a controlling stake, taking a controlling interest in Pure Industries AG and Pure Bajaj. And so that's very definitive. But then when you look at the details of it, there's not an agreed price. They use the term call option, which in its technical definition, again, is not a commitment. It's an option, right? And not an obligation. And
yes.
And it doesn't take place for a year. So the deal is in some sort of gray area where it seems like they're in charge, they're in control, and perhaps they own it. But there isn't any very definitive language that I've read anywhere yet that says that it is definitive, or says that it's done.
Is this one of those instances where Bajaj is really in the driver's seat and KTM is a little bit powerless at this point?
Absolutely. In fact, you could argue that that's been the case for quite a while. It's certainly the case now.
Let's take a short break for a few words from our sponsor. Picture this: you're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, and you're tuning up your engine with parts that you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease, and because you're committed to riding that thing farther than the odometer can even handle, you start thinking to yourself, you know what? I could probably use some new brakes, a shock. This baby, well, it deserves a new air filter. So you head right back to eBay. You can find any part you need there. It's unreal. From headlights to air filters to exhaust systems, all the way to those carbon fiber rims you've had in your mind. eBay is the stock garage of your dreams. And you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit, because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major and mods are always intense. So you need to know those parts are guaranteed to fit every time before you dive in wrench first. And on the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back. Simple as that. You know what you love more than your bike itself, and that is, of course, riding it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance and locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay, minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back in the road, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info to get the exact parts that fit. When you see that green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. But now that you know all of this, just imagine standing at that open garage door looking at the bike you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible, whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Now back to my conversation with Brian Price. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Now, Brian, as an active motorcyclist and as a KTM owner and someone who's really watched their product line, you believe that a lot of their woes come back to the motorcycles they make. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yes. KTM got where they are by being very innovative with their product strategy. They built motorcycles that other manufacturers did not, and they made them unique and they made them superior. And over time, that got diluted either by the growth and bureaucracy inside of the company, or also the acquisition of other brands and then duplicating the product line under those brands, Husqvarna and Gas. And so over time, they lost some of that innovativeness. Certainly didn't carry it forward into their street motorcycles very much. And
the thing that I just sort of jump in, but the thing that I found sort of curious is that, and this seems to be a sort of the natural devolution of companies, and I think it's a very human trait, which is when things are going well, you think, well, things are only going to keep going, things are going to get better. I mean, it's almost, you could see that during COVID, which is the astounding sales for the motorcycle industry, and the parts and apparel and everything else just went through the roof. And I think everybody thought, well, this is the new normal. I've read something about Specialized bicycles, crushing tens of thousands of bicycles in China because they can't flood the market because it means everything new will be worthless. And I wonder with adding Gas and Husky and all these other brands, did Harley not do the same thing with Buell and with MV? And it seems like it's almost, is it greed? What causes companies to do that?
acquiring other brands or launching other brands, I think, is good product strategy as long as it includes differentiation. And I would argue that Harley has not done enough of that. They acquired they acquired a couple of other brands, or they started a couple of other brands, but did not really follow through, give them enough time, resources, and runway to pay off. And then clipping them, I think, going back to their sort of core product means tying themselves to a declining customer base. In KTM's case, they had lots of room to expand within the motorcycle industry, but they were following a product strategy that would be best described as redundant. And so they never really leveraged any sort of differentiate between these three brands. And of course, brands are all about the passion that the owners and purchasers have for them. And redundancy is not very inspiring. In fact, it dilutes the brand strength and the feel for it, the passion for it. I think that they have an opportunity to revisit that now with a clear, fresh set of eyes and a much bigger checkbook. And I really hope, the way that I see it, a lot of pieces of this acquisition, as undetermined as they are going to go fairly straightforward. The finance and the distribution, things like that, they're all going to sort themselves out. Where they really are going to either succeed or fail is making motorcycles that people want to buy up and down the price structure of their product offering. And that sounds really easy, but it's going to be quite complex because it is, gosh, what is it? 4 brands, 5 brands? Well, they got rid of MV Agusta, but it's some 5 brands now, 4 or 5 brands. It's KTM, Husqvarna, Gas, and Bajaj. And as I said earlier, there's going to be a little bit of blending in, I'm sure, the product that's offered, but they have to be very careful to do that. As much as they have to be careful, it also presents a huge opportunity for them.
Brian, I think the question that many people are asking, including myself, which is that Stefan Pierer, the head of Pierer that owns KTM, his seemingly unwillingness to listen to analysts or to dealers or to so many people that were selling him, or even other industries, bicycling, for instance, that were going through the same downturns. And yet, as you said, he was plowing through, 2 production lines well into 2024, stockpiling up everywhere. I mean, do you have any sense of what was going on there?
As you mean as to why he did that?
Yeah, as to why he just ignored the trends, which seemed very obvious that overall demand was really softening for motorcycles.
There are many accounts where people have said that he was told directly that the market was going to slow down, and there were a lot of signs for it. But by those many accounts, he ignored or even rejected that information. And I would imagine that at least that's due, at least in part, to his sort of willful personality. Being a force probably helped him when he was trying to build the company. No one would really imagine that they could have become the company that they are now back in the 90s. And I'm sure that took a lot of mental strength and intestinal fortitude. But it seems that almost got away from him, and he sort of built an insular group of people around him, or at least an insular sort of state of mind where he didn't listen to the warnings and didn't see the signs that the market was going to slow down.
And here we are. Now, is he, as you said, it's a very, the corporate structure is very complex dealing with KTM. Is he really gone from the building, like without a spare set of keys? Can you speak to that at all?
All of the accounts that bring his future up regarding the acquisition of Bajaj by Bajaj, excuse me, say that he's going to be out by the completion of the insolvency process, which is next month. So he's out quickly. Usually, when there's an acquisition, the buyers will keep the old staff or CEO on to give a kind of one big happy family appearance, and to have some sort of continuity, and to not upset the fans of that particular company or brand so much. Not here. It's conspicuous that he is out completely and immediately. And in fact, that was one of the conditions that Rajiv Bajaj specified. Supposedly the banks had specified it also, but that was one of the conditions that Rajiv Bajaj explicitly requested, that he not be involved with the company going forward. And I think that's telling.
That's extremely telling. It's like,
Yes.
honey, leave right now. What do you think the long-term effect will be for KTM? Let's look ahead for 5, 10, 15 years. Will this be seen as a blip, or will it be a fundamentally different company?
That's a fantastic question. And I'm not going to answer directly. I'm going to make another statement, but I think it ties in. The first thing is the idea that KTM has been saved or is back is a bit of a stretch. I don't think that they are anywhere near that. There are still a huge amount of things that have to fall into place and occur for them to actually get back on a solid financial footing, and to not alienate their existing customer base, and then of course to open up some new customer bases. And by the way, it's worth mentioning that their marketing team has been saying, "Hey, we're back," and, orange blood, and that's the height of irresponsibility. It's just a really foolish thing to do, because it just, even if it were true, it just projects a hubris, an arrogant attitude. And if anything, right now, it would be to their benefit to be more humble. They would inspire people more if they were more humble, and it became a comeback story. And they're not doing that. As far as what it looks like going forward, yeah, I don't know that anybody can really answer that. The big questions to me are what happens to Husqvarna, and less so for me, Gas. Husqvarna is a brand that I love, and they're very, very famous. And I wonder what's going to happen to them. I wonder what the product mix is going to be in between the two companies. I think that it presents a huge amount of opportunities, but as far as projecting out what that looks like, the only thing that I can say is that this always looked like it was going to be the most viable, most positive option for Bajaj to acquire KTM. Always looked like the option with the most potential, much more than if they're acquired by a private equity company, for example. Bajaj has a relationship with them. They already manufacture motorcycles. They're in the motorcycle business. They have distribution. They've been partners with KTM for quite a bit of time. Their product line doesn't conflict. It's not redundant with KTM's. And so there's lots and lots of potential here for it to go really well. And there isn't really a lot of indication that it's not going to go well. It's just kind of the complexity of it all. And I realize I'm not giving a definitive answer, but that's one of the unique things about this whole situation is there's constantly been more questions than answers. There's constantly, consistently been more unknowns than knowns. And that continues now. The only thing that has changed is that it does seem like there is now much more of a positive potential future than there was, even a week or so ago.
And I would think that, with Bajaj behind them, because of note recently, KTM was having issues with suppliers, obviously, who've been paid, 30 cents on the dollar, concerned about shipping off more stuff. And this is, in the old days. And again, Ducati went through this for years. Is, all of a sudden the suppliers, they go from Velia gauges to Nippon Denso and back and forth because, they'd owe them a bunch of money. And so they'd go over there. And, this is not an anomaly. This maybe the size of it is significant. But I think it's also the fact that people feel it so viscerally shows you the investment they had in the brand. And I think a lot of people almost feel personally slighted. I'm not sure they'd feel this way if Suzuki was in this straits. But KTM, a lot of people seem to take it really personally, don't they?
They do. And the reason for that is that there are few brands that have had the strength and passion and breadth and depth of KTM. They did a fantastic job at branding, and
ready to race. I mean, is that not the most clever, byline?
It is a fantastic slogan.
Yeah.
And it's something that they could organize all of the company around, not just the marketing, but the design and the R&D, the models that they selected, how they were spec'd. It's a fantastic slogan. You can call it a rallying cry or a cause almost. Mm-hmm. And it worked. It really did work. I mean, eventually it became a little bit of a limit, but it was a fantastic way to approach the market. And they were very, very successful at it. And they have some of the most loyal fans. And it's anything changing that, anything that messed with that, it's going to be really hard to keep some of those loyal fans, make some of them happy. It's unless they really did the same exact thing that they were doing, some people are going to be disappointed. The real thing that I hope occurs is that I hope Bajaj recognizes that and treads very lightly and does a very good job of not alienating those people any further.
In closing words from eBay Motors, picture this: you're halfway through a DIY motorcycle fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. Well, it's okay because, whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brake rotors, lights, and tire exhaust systems, whatever you need. And it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Thank you for listening to The Lowdown Show.